And this is episode, I think this is episode three. It's three or four. So thank you, Albana. And is it Albana or Albana?
Albana, yeah, you said it perfectly. That doesn't happen often, so
Cool. And then how do you pronounce your last name?
Tolaj,
Tolaj?
but technically, if I was gonna give you the literal, pronunciation, it's Tolai, but,
Tolai. Okay.
yeah, but Tolaj is a little bit easier. I don't know if one's easier than the other, but I'll accept both.
It's funny, for some people, Tolai is probably easier than Tolaj.
Yeah, and I can really dissect where somebody's from based on
Yeah.
the way they pronounce it. It's really interesting, but if
Where's
they say
uh where's your family from?
I was just gonna say, if they say Tolaj, I know that they're, like, former Yugoslavian or European, but, it's both of my parents actually were from Kosovo,
Okay.
and I'm first generation here, so, a lot of my family is still in the European countries, mainly Kosovo.
Gotcha.
Um, a lot of people don't know where it's at, very, very tiny
I was gonna
country, right next to, Albania, right above Greece, but
Gotcha.
yeah. Little hole in the wall country, but super cute. I love it there.
Those are the best.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
And so you said you're first generation here, and most of your family lives overseas still. So kind of talk about, like who you are, where you're from, a little bit of family background, how you got here,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
just your brief personal history.
Yeah, that is a really big part of who I am just because I'm so close to that. My parents came to America. They planted roots in New York City, in Jamaica, Queens. That's where I was born and raised for a little while. And my dad came to America first by way through help with a distant cousin's friend. You know how it always goes. You just know someone who knows someone. And
Right.
then a few months later, my mom came. I think she was pregnant with my brother at the time. And my
Okay.
older sister, she was born in Kosovo as well. I am a twin, so that's another big part of mine. I'm one of four. And
Nice.
yeah, just growing up in New York City with a family that didn't know English. I personally didn't even know English until I was about, I want to say 5 or 6 years old. I
Gotcha.
almost failed kindergarten because I didn't have parents who knew English. Where was I going to learn from?
Right.
And they were very connected to their roots. There's always Albanian music on, Albanian TV. Um, so kind of had a very interesting um yeah, upbringing in regard to that. My parents were very, we were raised in poverty, and they were hustlers. I mean, both of my parents were working 2 3 jobs, and um ended up bringing my grandmother here. She kind of really played a big part in raising us. So yeah, I owe everything to them. I wouldn't be where I'm at without their sacrifices, leaving their family, running from genocide, and they were 22, 23 years old, with 4 kids trying to make it in a country. So I owe everything to them.
Yeah, that I love that story, and it reminds me of. Are you familiar with Gary V?
Gary V, yes, I follow
Yeah.
him on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. Yeah.
So he have you gotten into like hearing his story and his background?
Not entirely. I am not going to lie. I'm newer to LinkedIn. I think
Okay,
I made LinkedIn back in, I want to say 2020, 2021.
gotcha.
And my boss was like, you got to get on LinkedIn. And I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
so behind on that. And he was one of the first people that I followed. So I'm not super familiar. I'm a little bit of like a ghost follower. I got to
Yeah,
start, I'm like a little like the shy one behind the computer. I'm like, I got to start, making a voice and learning more about people on here.
it's all good. So, but the reason that I bring Gary up is because, and if for whatever reason, if Gary, you see this, don't let me butcher your story. But
No, you're good.
Gary's family is, I believe he's first generation, former Soviet Union, and he same similar style story. Like family was coming over here to get out of the genocide, get out of a lot of the things that were going on overseas that I personally can't speak on, even though I've heard his story hundreds of times. But just and you know the thing he always talks about is his parents. Like his dad was a hustler. Like dad was a hustler, was gonna get it by any means, and barely spoke English. You know all of
Mhm.
that. So Gary grew up in the family business. His mom was a great mother, and he contributes and attributes everything in his success to the way that he was raised and what they showed him. And so I've found that a lot of first generation Americans have a very similar upbringing story and a very deep respect for their parents and their
Oh, yeah.
grandparents and what their family has done for them. So
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
that just it was just something that I
I'll have
wanted to
to yeah, I'll have to kinda track that down. I love, um, connecting with people on that because it's something, it borderlines darkness and light, I feel like it's very hard for other people to relate or understand unless you've been through it. It's definitely I didn't have very similar upbringings to like a lot of friends that I was growing up with. A lot of like stories I've shared or even things that like my parents have went through. Sometimes it's the things you hear in movies, you don't really realize the intensity and complexity of it unless, you were raised in that and went through it.
right.
I'll
And
definitely
even
look
like
into his story, yeah.
yeah, and even like myself, my grandfather, he does a lot of genealogy work, and so we've actually tracked back far enough in our family tree to where like we know exactly what ship the slave ancestors came in on and
Mhm.
so just that leading into their experiences in East Texas with segregation and things like that. Like even though they experienced that, I'm 4 or 5 generations removed from all of that. So it's like the only way I can get this is through the stories that were told, passed down, and then learning the history. Whereas you're much more connected to everything that's going on. And like you said, the intensity of what goes into making that transition, whether it is as an immigrant from another country or just somebody who, experienced a different learning curve because of whether it was language barriers, impoverished areas that predominantly do not focus on helping people out of them. Like I know a lot of East Coast, Southern states are really, we're very much so focused on the things that we know. And
Mhm.
whenever we have to extend ourselves outside of that, for some reason we get uncomfortable and we just try to push it under the rug.
Oh, yeah. And, you mentioned your 4th, 5th generation, and I feel like when I was younger, a generation feels so long, and now that I get older, I'm like, 100 years actually goes by very fast,
For sure.
So take that for what it's worth, but
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, all that being said, let's talk about okay, as a first generation woman in America, what has your kind of life and business been like? How did
Mhm.
it start? I know you're in logistics now. Talk a little bit about that and just kind of give us an idea of what you've gone through, things you've seen, and just kind of your general business experience as a young woman in America.
Yeah, I mean, growing up in Kosovo, a lot of the women, it's very, very traditional values. I mean, a lot of the women are staying home with the kids. A lot of my family, they didn't even have a vehicle until I want to say like 2003. When I would visit, it's like horse and buggy, very, very like what you would imagine 1800s to be like. So my mom did not actually start working until, we came to America, and it was very untraditional for a woman in the household to be working. So I feel like I have like such respect for my mom because she had, 4 young children. Same with my dad. And she was working 3 jobs at a point. I mean, she was working in like bakeries. My dad was working like painting cars, doing side jobs, whatever they could get their hands on. They were very limited. So I had an upbringing where I wasn't around my parents too often, those first 10 years, mainly with my grandmother. watching them in and out, exhausted, barely getting rest. And, seeing that as a young child, you're like, oh, working doesn't seem so fun. So for the longest time, I'm like, I want to be a homemaker. And then as I got older, I started to get more inspired by that. And, my mom has a great career now in healthcare. She's been working at the same hospital for 25 years. My dad, I lost him in 2020 to cancer, and he was a hustler. I mean, I talk about him more because he's no longer with us, and there's like a lot of stories I can't share because I'm like, oh, I don't know if that's legal. Nothing super bad, just
Right.
maybe falsifying papers to get certain jobs and whatnot.
Yeah.
But
Things that everybody does, whether they like to admit it or not.
yeah, and I'm like, "What are you gonna do now? He's not here." But, he ended up when he passed, both of my parents were citizens, and it was a very hard road for them and very hard to see. And, my dad was a truck driver, and I used to go he had, like, a little box truck and would go through, make deliveries through the tri-state areas. And when I moved to Pennsylvania, I used to ride with him, and he would drop me off at my best friend's house in New York. And, he was just your old crabby truck driver, owner op, throwing the papers around and getting
Yeah.
frustrated. And that was when I first took an interest to it because I loved that he kind of worked for himself and he made his own schedule and he got to travel. And we got to, I got to sightsee at least those 3 states and go to cute little eateries with him. And it was a bonding experience. I and I think I owe my first career to just my upbringing. Women were like always the nurturers, right? So naturally, my sisters are in healthcare. My mom's in healthcare. They're nurses, paramedics. And I got my start in healthcare. And I knew right out of high school, I just wanted to work. I was like living on my own. I just wanted that fast track to a job. So I got my associate's degree in 9 months. I did a 3-month internship after that. And I found myself working in hospice for 2 or 3 years. And then I ended up finding myself in orthopedic surgery. And I think working in orthopedic surgery was where I got my tough skin.
Yeah.
I also bartended for like 10 years, on the side during all this time, which I think can also,
I'd say probably
I gotta
added
give some credit there. That's probably where I got the toughest skin. But I think that's where I first started to see a lot of challenges with women in the work field. You're working with a lot of high level surgeons, mainly men. At least the facility I was working at, there were no female surgeons. Even, HR management, it was predominantly male ran. And that's where I found myself kind of at a roadblock. I just knew I probably wasn't going to grow anymore. I think I worked in surgery, I want to say about 4 to 5 years. And I was venting to a friend actually about it. And I'm like, they're so mean to us. And I watched a surgeon, throw a scalpel at a woman and, in the surgical unit, and he had no
That's
repercussions. Nothing
crazy.
happened to the surgeon, like slap on the wrist. And I'm like, I don't really know if this is for me. And that's just one example of many. And she's like, I work in manufacturing and we actually have a customer service position opening up. And I'm like, oh, cool. What is that? And I didn't even hear anything she said. The job was paying like $5 more an hour. And I'm like, you know what? I don't really care what you guys are doing over there. Just get me in. If I could work at a desk and make $5 more, like I don't even care. And that was kind of my entry. It was at random, but it was very, very intense. And it's not a job that you would find on my LinkedIn or anything because it just
Yeah.
wasn't a good experience. It was kind of just taking the surgeons, but replacing it with manufacturing.
Yeah.
My first day on the job, I actually was fighting for the position with another female, and I did not know that. They were basically like, "Hey, you both want the job. You have 3 weeks, and you're both basically in competition with one another." And I'm, like, looking around, and the only other female in the office is this friend, who got me into the place, and I'm like, "Wait, I have to fight someone for a job? I just quit my job, I just quit my
Crazy.
career." this isn't even guaranteed. And then part of it is like, how does this work, legally? But um, so they basically they split a logistics coordinator job between the both of us. So she was doing like the order entry and I was doing the truck routing and building. So I kind of got like the brunt of the work, I felt like.
Yeah.
I'm coming from surgery where a lot of it, I'm taking blood pressures, I'm removing sutures, and now I'm building multi-stop truckloads. And my head was spinning. It was crazy. And it was very cutthroat. It was really like it was a manufacturer, so you're dealing with the warehouse, you're dealing with the office, and um, at the end of it, they brought us both into a room, and we're like sitting next to each other, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is it. They're like picking one of us. Like I might not have a job, after today, and they ended up giving the position to me, and it was awful. I mean, a part of me wished I, like, didn't even go through with that because it was just the 2 women and, like, a predominantly male. It was like Survivor. Like, I don't even know how to explain it, and my heart, like, crushed for her, and it really, I didn't realize it at the time, but it really kinda, like, pinned us against one another,
Yeah.
and I found myself like, why are women having to, like, compete for a job? Like, and I remember asking the plant manager, I'm like, out of both of us, were there like one of us had to be, a better pick for the job? She had experience, she had worked for a manufacturer previously. And I'm just sitting thinking, like, why not just give her the job? Like, why me? And I learned very quickly that I probably wasn't picked for the right reasons. I think I did a good job. I did, but I think on paper she was the better choice. She had the experience. She's done this before, and even though I killed it, and I feel like I earned my way after being in this unfortunate, competitive situation, I'm like, why did it even have to go there? Why did it even have to become a competition? And the transportation manager, he was training me on some reports, and he was like, he was going away for surgery. He was like on FMLA upcoming for quite a few weeks, and he's like, here's my phone number after our training conducted, and he's like, if you have any questions or need anything, reach out at any time. And I'm like, oh, thank you. I definitely will have questions because hello, I'm new here. I don't know what I'm doing. And I learned very quickly after he asked me out on a couple of dates that I'm like, I probably wasn't, I probably wasn't misreading this. Like, this is very weird.
Yeah.
And I ignored them. I didn't reach out to him when I did need support, which in the end, I was shooting myself in the foot because with that came, mistakes. And I had made a couple mistakes in that job. And when he came back from his surgery, I was silenced in meetings. I was, if I spoke up in our morning meetings, I was spoken over and I wasn't even allowed to like finish my sentences. Or if there were mistakes that weren't my fault, I noticed very quickly they were kind of getting spun to be my fault. So I brought this up to HR, and I was totally disregarded by HR, which was unfortunate because it was 2 women that I thought I could go to and speak to. And in return, they just moved my desk right next to this person. And I'm like, why are they moving me to sit next to this fella who I'm like already having issues with and feel very uncomfortable? And he was like sharing photos off my Instagram with like family members on vacation and just like picking fun at me. And they had really inappropriate nicknames for me. And I was, always very professional, but I had a couple friendships I made with, the warehouse managers and a lot of the loaders and forklift drivers. And they were the ones that expressed that to me. And I think because my first complaint kind of went swept under the rug, and in return, it actually got worse. I made a complaint about this person, and in return, I got forced to sit next to him, 8 hours of my workday, and it was awful. And um, I think, that was a big reason why I no longer spoke up, and I ended up leaving the job. So I put my 2 weeks in, kind of kept my head down. I took that year of experience and I went into a different logistics role. And with that, I ran into similar situations. Nothing quite the same, but not as intense. And I kind of job hopped like every year for a while, which in hindsight was good because I got manufacturing experience, I got like asset based experience, and then I ended up where I'm at now with this brokerage. And I'm working under a new brokerage, but the team I've been alongside for 5 years now. And now working with them, looking back at my experiences, I'm like, oh my gosh, why didn't I I should have really just like made some noise and like put my foot down. And
Yeah.
I'm very lucky though to have found a job where I'm like, wow, this is like what it should be like. And this is amazing. And I wish all women starting out in logistics could be in my position now because it was tough. And I wish I could remember this lady's name, but she just shared something on LinkedIn the other day, and it was like, wow, she hit the nail on the head. It's like being a woman in a male dominated field, you get more attention, but you get less opportunities. And I'm like, wow, she's like on the money. That's exactly how it is. It's like you may get more conversation, you may get more opportunity, but you're not really taken serious.
Yeah.
And it took a lot of practice to learn how to advocate for myself. So I don't want that to discourage anyone. I think, 7, 8 years later, I think the industry has already changed so immensely. I mean, from that point to where we are now, it's like night and day, at least my experience. But it's tough, man. Yeah, now, and I think that comes with maturity too. I was very young starting out in logistics, and I was also new to it, and I don't think I knew how to really speak up and advocate for myself. And, you're also worried about paying bills and,
Right.
you got to put gas in the tank and food on the table. And I think people play into that and take advantage of it. Um, it's tough. It's tough. Any advice though that I would give to women is just advocate for yourself. And if it feels wrong, it's probably wrong. And don't feel bad to make waves. you
So
know.
I guess it's safe to say that that manufacturer is not a customer of yours right now.
Unfortunately not, because, as crazy as that situation was, they are a multi-billion dollar company, and I learned so much in that year. I mean,
Yeah.
it's insane. It was that type of job where you're like sweating at your desk every day, and
Right.
I was on the other end at that position. Like I was the customer utilizing brokers,
Right.
which I think has helped me as a broker understand the customer
Right.
because, for two positions that I've held, I've been in those shoes. So like I get it, I know what it's like. But they're not a customer of mine. Um, I would love if they were because
Yeah.
it sucks to have that one bad seed, kind of leave a lasting impression like that. But I
Yeah.
did have amazing coworkers there. I did learn a lot. It is an amazing company and I love what they do. I believe in them. But, sometimes it is what it is. If he ever retires, I would love to knock on their door again, and see what we could do. But
For
for
sure.
now, they're not a customer of mine.
Gotcha. There you go for now.
Yeah.
So who would you say has been kind of like the catalysts for you recognizing the differentiation between 6, 7, 8 years ago in the industry on both sides and kind of what you've begun to experience now? Are there anybody or any people that, you obviously you have a great team around you, but is there anyone who really kind of decided like, hey, I'm going to spend time guiding you in the right direction and show you how to even maneuver in some of these less than fortunate situations that you're just going to have to break through, because I know it can be disheartening to
Mhm.
even find a great job without having someone to essentially kind of mentor you through the process of how to navigate through some of those relationships that maybe it does start off a certain way, but here's how you address it and here's kind of the route to take to find a resolution that doesn't necessarily end with, this person feeling like you outed them or whatever the case may be. I know there's different ways that different people communicate and find resolutions like that. So have there been any specific people who have kind of helped you along with that?
Yeah, so I wish I had found somebody sooner or maybe seeked somebody sooner. My dad being in the industry, he was like, don't do it. Don't do like don't go into logistics. Like it's not for you. And
Right.
in a weird way, that like enticed me into it more because I'm like, what's going on over there? Like, let me check it out. It is very That's probably the most unfortunate thing is that I didn't seek a role model. It wasn't until my current director, his name is Kelly. Shout out Kelly, like he's awesome. But when I received the email, I applied for the job, received an email from Kelly, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome! Like, a woman director of this logistics company. Well, Kelly is a sir. And I got very thrown off when I was on the interview and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I just hope this is something
Oh,
different," because it
that's,
really enticed me that I was like, "Oh, a woman director of this logistics company, like this is
yeah,
great." But Kelly is such an advocate for like women in not even just in the industry, but just women in leadership in general. And my direct manager, Samantha, she has been like probably one of my biggest role models, as well as Kelly, because he's just such a big advocate, for women in the field. And I never even imagined myself, wanting to be like in a leadership position. I never imagined myself, being taken through those ropes until I met them. I mean, that wasn't even anything on the forefront of my mind because my experiences, up to that point have been like, I'm just going to be in this administrative role and I like it and I feel like I'm good at it. And, every day is fun and interesting and my days fly by and whatever I can get into, that's fine with me. That's kind of where I left it. And um, immediately upon, speaking with him in my interview and hearing that, his company is 85%, women ran and managed, I'm like, "Oh, I see what you're doing here. This is awesome." And I think that's why I found myself like, "Oh, this is home."
yeah,
It's work, but you spend a lot of your time with these people. I mean, you're spending 40 plus hours, around these people and it's it's easy to say there should be a work-life balance, but they really do go hand in hand. So I think it's so important to find people that want to see you win and, see your goals and want to help you get there. And unfortunately, it wasn't until, 2019 when I met them that I was able to see myself as more, than someone that's just in the background, like, building these truckloads and kind of putting my head down and getting through the day. I I think it would have been a lot different if I found that from the get-go. But, sometimes that's a unicorn. And I think I found myself, like I found the unicorn and I'll forever like I truly believe this will forever be my team. I mean, I don't think we picture a team without one or the other. So I'm very lucky for them.
that's great. And that was going to be kind of leading into my next question. How do you feel like men can, and what do men need to do to further advocate for women, either in leadership or in the logistics arena? And, what can we do to help? I wouldn't necessarily say put women on a pedestal because that's what kind of has led to the disruption of women's success. But how
Mhm.
can we be strong allies for women and actually be, a secondary voice for you all, whether it comes to the social setting side of the industry and how to be a proponent for a what word would I like? A healthy environment, or even just how can we be of use and a strong ally in furthering you all's success in these industries that are predominantly male dominated.
Yeah, I think, it takes both men and women, to kind of catapult that and really put that into play because you can't do it without each other. I mean, it's all hand in hand. And I think the biggest thing is speaking up on, behalf of the women that you're working with. And I think there's a lot of unconscious that comes into it. Like, I think a lot of men might not realize certain things that they do because that's just the societal norm. You're not even realizing that maybe certain women aren't getting opportunities. So I think keeping opportunities open for women, I think speaking up for them, advocating for them. There's been men on my team that are like, oh, I think Albana would be really great for that. And I I can really say that, a couple of the men on our team have helped me get into the role that I'm in because they're like, "Hey, did you ever think that you might be good at, doing like 50-50 sales and account management? Like operationally you're great, but like I love talking to you, like you've helped me out in XYZ areas and maybe you should think about, this position or, growing in this area." And I think just keeping those opportunities open and you know, also taking a chance. I didn't come from a heavy logistics background, and the person that got me into logistics was a man, and he's like, you're organized, you know how to multitask, you're good with people, and I think you got that from bartending, and of course, having like a surgical background, you got to really keep like cut and dry and keep your appointments straight and keep things moving, and it's very fast paced. And I think just taking into consideration, even if women aren't in a high level position or a growing position, is looking at their strengths and just really helping them get in certain opportunities that they could grow in. It's easy to get comfortable, and I think I owe it to the men on our team that they're like, you should try this. You should go out of your comfort zone because you're good at XYZ. You might do really great over here. And I'm like, I never thought about that. I don't know if I would like it. And I would have a lot of self-doubt. And so sometimes maybe just helping women remove that self-doubt, giving them those opportunities, really finding their strengths and see where those strengths could help them, grow. Because for me, it took a really big hit to my ego, where I started in logistics. It was like, I always saw myself as the assistant. I never saw myself working in like a BD realm or, working right under the owner and founder of the company. I would have never envisioned that 5-6 years ago. And I think it takes both men and women to open those doors and provide those opportunities. And if you see anything like funky or fishy, speak up for us because sometimes, we're too scared to. And, people are like, I think women are more worried about the repercussions, and I think that if you are in an unfortunate situation, we like, haha, you kind of laugh and roll it off your shoulder because I think it speaks volumes if there were men that jumped in and kind of, advocated for us and spoke up for us. And, if you're in a position to offer opportunities, like really look at the person, it's easy. I don't want to say this because it's not my experience, but I'm sure it's easier for men to get certain positions over women. Men tend to come off like more confident, and stronger. But on paper, there might be, characteristics to that other person that would fit your role better. So just keep those opportunities open and advocate for one another.
I like that. I I think the concept was so there's this idea among I don't even know what they're necessarily called, but social and economic psychologists that
Mhm.
men tend to make more money and get into higher executive positions because they're less agreeable. And basically, all that means is that a man is willing to fight in the communicative sense for their belief in themselves, aka confidence, like you said. And
Mhm.
so I do think that it is very important for men to, one, understand that and not negate the fact that that has been the historical trend, that men will argue more in economic settings because men are, and this also goes back to the like men die earlier than women kind of thing, because men, for some reason, we feel like our perspective deserves justice. Like whatever it is that we think, it deserves to be spoken. And and I think that that's true to an extent, but if we empowered women more to represent themselves and speak on at least what they feel about themselves or certain situations, we would start to see a trend, which I think we're seeing now, where more women are getting into executive level positions. And even if it's not an executive level position, a position that is more empowering for them as an individual, whereas similar to what you just described, where in a
Yeah.
50-50 role where you can actually work on both sides of the business. And that probably is also very beneficial for your team, not just yourself. And so I think that's something that I've taken from the women around me as I've seen women be successful in many different roles. And something that I know is that I am most successful when I have impactful women around me helping me do the thing that I'm trying to do. And I think that it's funny that most of us men would like to think that we could do it on our own or just with a couple of buddies or whatever the case may be. We could run through the walls, but then it's like, I think about the next step. If we run through the wall and we get through the wall, what do we do next?
Right.
Because we got through the wall, and how are we going to direct ourselves from that point? And so I'm very much so, it's funny, I kind of jokingly, I think I have to say that this was a joke legally, but um, I jokingly posted on Instagram probably like 2 weeks ago. I said, I'm not an equal opportunity employer. I want to hire all women. I don't want to hire men. I just want it to be a team full of women because, one, more likely than not, they're going to get the job done without, not necessarily without giving an opinion of the job, but without falling to Collin's opinion of what the job is supposed to be. Like,
Mhm.
the work will get executed. It'll get executed in a timely manner, more likely than not, in my experience. And then we can talk about the chaos that lives in Collin, and we can go on and
Yeah.
go
I
about it.
think it's a balance. I mean, because I've worked with a lot of male leaders that are, they have the ideas, and then sometimes women on that team are the executors. And I think like marrying those two together, that's how you become successful. And I love the point that you made right before that because I was told many times previously that I was very aggressive, like very assertive, that I was coming off a certain way when I spoke to others. And that thought has crossed my mind. I'm like, "Ugh, well, if I was a guy, I'm sure that, like, I would have been given a promotion." So
Right.
it's interesting how like some a woman could come in very confident and command respect in a room or be like very strong, and I consider myself both personal and professional to be like a very strong woman. Like I am very opinionated, but I'm very open-minded. I 50% run a household. I just had a baby 3 4 months ago, and I'm over here like managing this and that and constantly doing 20 things at once. And I'm like, why am I actually had a boss tell me that. He's like, you're too aggressive. You're coming off like too assertive to people. They're not liking it. And I'm like, well, who's not liking it? And it was, a couple of these men. And I'm like, well, that's interesting because I'm mirroring them because, they were in leadership roles and I'm just mirroring what they're doing because how do I get there? I'm learning from you guys. So I'm like, I'm not doing anything different than they are. So it's interesting that they were in leadership roles, but I was bossy and, I was too opinionated and I'm, speaking up too much. So it's very interesting how that plays out. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that, has heard that before. So and I
No,
don't really think people are realizing it. Again, Maybe they are. I'd like to think that they aren't just because of these societal norms, and it's, it's a very touchy topic, but I'm like, I'm just doing what they're doing. This is crazy. And a lot of what I learned and a lot of my skills, I can also give credit like to the men that I've worked with. Um, so then I found myself, in hindsight, trying after that conversation, trying to like almost soften myself up. Like now I'm like, oh my gosh, like they think I'm bossy, I'm too aggressive. And then I ended up actually kind of hurting myself. And I think that that hurt opportunities for me because now I'm trying to like soften my demeanor and I'm trying to like talk to people a certain way. And maybe if I had a great idea, I was too worried to speak up. I'm like, oh, I don't want them to think I'm like opinionated or like stepping on toes. And I remember my boss actually like, stop saying you're stepping on toes. Like that's not a thing. Like you have great ideas, you have an opinion. Like we're here to collab and we're here to do better. And without everyone's opinion and without everyone's skill sets coming into play, like how do you grow? How do you, logistics is constantly changing. That's the only thing that stays the same in logistics is change. And I think collaboration is huge. And I'm like, oh, ew, why am I doing that? And then it took thinking, I'm like, wow, I thought I had to, soften myself up and be a little more quiet and kind of, slowly step over people or like, I was coming off like very meek or like even softening the way that I talked because he's like, you got a very raspy voice already and like you already come off really assertive. And I'm like, oh my gosh, do I? Now I like own it. I'm like, I don't care, man. This is how I talk. This is my
Yeah,
voice. My voice has a place and I don't need to soften that up for anybody. And my team right now, they've been a huge, huge piece of that. And I'm like, oh, that's so icky. You're right. Like I can't believe I let that get to me. So it's very interesting you make that point. It like brings me back to that. It's
yeah.
pretty crazy.
And I've noticed that, like, I know women who have done the same thing, like have, and I think docile is a good word. Like
Yes.
the
Yeah.
traditional American man
Mhm.
desires docile women. And the funny thing about that to me, like I'm a very aggressive person naturally. And my family, like aggressive, most of my family has aggression with control. Even the women in my family, like they're not necessarily outspoken, but my grandmother was a principal. Most of my family, they were teachers and like put their foot down teachers too, not the teachers
Oh
that
yeah.
get walked over. And so I got to experience, women who were always able and willing to put their foot down, whether it was with administration or with young kids who just didn't know how to act, whatever the case may
Right.
be. And I think men need to understand that the more a woman is willing and able to put their foot down and act on their beliefs and speak their mind, the better the relationship is going to be in the long run. Because what ends up coming, what I've seen from women having to take a docile role, kind of a docile mindset, and alter who they really are, is in the long run, that woman resents you.
Mhm.
You eventually wish that the relationship was something that it's not as a man. And then you're kind of diluting the potential of that relationship in many ways. And I have found myself trying to get women to speak up for themselves in many different arenas, whether it's in personal training, in the gym stuff,
Mhm.
or if it's as any kind of athlete, but especially in business, because I think men are softer than we sit here and we speak on. And I think that the more men will accept the fact that there is a feminine side to who they are, they do love and they want nurture. And like, I'll be the first to say, I love getting my head rubbed. I love massage. I love all of the comforts that this world can provide from women. But it's also like, you also have to be able to protect the women around you and their hearts and their minds and their bodies in order to be able to receive the love from these women. And so I think that like a word that you've used pretty frequently is balance. There is definitely a balance that has to be had there, and I hope
Definitely.
that I can do a good job to provide that
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah, and like growing up, my dad was my best friend. I mean, I owe every bit of common sense I have, every bit of work ethic to both of my parents. But I think with that came a lot of like masculine energy. And that's been something that I battled both, personal and professional, like in dating and in career. Um, I would actually get spoken on, like, to that a lot. It was always like, I've had men call that out, like, in dating and professional, and I'm like, "Oh, like, I just have too much masculine energy," but I'm like, "Do I? Or do I just, like, know how to command a room? Do I like to put my career first? Am I, like, career focused? Do I enjoy what I do?" I'm like, sometimes it's like, why is it masculine energy, though? Like, can you explain that to me? Like, what am I doing? Is it because normally, like, men are in these roles or men are commanding the room? Or, is it like a man on the other side of this phone at times? And I think women have to work harder sometimes, you know, to kind of squash that. And I
Yeah,
find a lot of the times if you just call it out and you're like, "Oh, can you explain that?" I've been on sales calls, and on the other end, there's been like inappropriate jokes made, or, something like, maybe if we were at a bar or something, I would chuckle and laugh, but in a professional setting, I'm like, and
yeah,
the best advice I can give, and I'm sure women do this already. If not, this is like a little trick you can use. If someone tells you an inappropriate joke, I just tell them, I don't get that joke. Can you explain it? And you'll literally see them stop in their track. The best is if you can see their face, when
yeah,
you call it out. And I'm like, I don't get it. Play into that a little bit. And then 98% of the time, it's like, "Oh, don't worry about it. Never mind." I'm
right,
like, "No, explain it. I wanna laugh. Like, I have a sense of humor. What's the joke?" And they're like, "No, no, no. All good. Anyways." And immediately, it's just take the reins on that and, like, demand respect, and don't worry about being called too aggressive or too assertive, but that's my favorite. I'm like, and I love that challenge. When I hear somebody approaching me like that, I'm like, this is gonna be fun." And I think a lot of that came with my bartending experience, because 'cause I'm like, "Ooh, you meet a lot of different people, and you find yourself in a lot of difficult situations, but um if anyone takes anything away, it's like, use that. It's hilarious." And then they catch themselves and they're like, "Oh, that might not be right."
right. Because then the mind starts actually going through what it meant when it said
Mhm.
that, and sometimes, and like that, I think the tradition unfortunately ends up being the word that gets used a lot when I speak about a lot of this, because it's like tradition in this country is, I mean, America's the youngest country still acknowledged. Like it's I don't even know how many years old, 380 years old, something like that. So it's like our traditions are so young and so immature, and they're built on so many poor foundations.
Mhm.
And because of that, I think that it has translated a lot into just like what we might consider comedy in social settings and things like that, that truly are inappropriate, but we chalk it up to being locker room talk and things like that, to where it's like, oh well, I didn't really mean it, I just said, well, why would you say something that you don't mean?
Yeah. And I have a sense of humor, and I
Right.
think there's certain accounts that I have that, you have like a different relationship with each customer. I mean, there's customers that I've really like bonded with and feel like I became friends with. There's other ones that are like just very like black and white, super corporate. Like I can totally understand different styles, but even those that I've become closer to, there is a certain like level of professionalism that you just keep in the workplace. And you can still joke and you can still have fun and laugh, but there's a big difference when like the joke is at your expense, or where it's like meant to be kind of like a jab at you, or somebody just blatantly not taking you serious. And it's very easy to differentiate the two. So it's unfortunate, but you're going to come across that a lot. And it's not that like, I wouldn't even want to work with somebody like that. It's just, I think also a lot of the times people have never been called out on it, and they might not even know, that they're doing something that is kind of not really leaving somebody feeling warm and fuzzy inside. So,
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing too, is not feeling, like you can call somebody out by also being like, maybe really sweet, maybe a little like, play into the ditziness a little bit, and whatever style is like more comfortable. Like for me, I would never be like, "Oh, that's really inappropriate. I don't like that." I'm not super confrontational, but like find your style and just call it out, cuz a lot of times these people have never been called out before, and you just got to call them out on it. Speak up
It's
for
a
yourself.
learning experience.
Mhm.
All right, Albana, I know that you've got work to do. So, if you have one, what I would like you to do is just give one little, you've given a lot of nuggets, but if there was
Yeah.
anything that you would like to leave young ladies with in regards to men or women, in regards to just, trying to increase the quality of their experience in business, I would love that. And then let everybody know where they can find you if they could if they wanted to locate you for your services and
Yeah, of course. I think the biggest advice I could give anybody, like both men and women, is to be confident, stay resilient, and bad days are temporary, bad moments are temporary. And back to one of your initial points is find a mentor. I mean, I think, like we spoke on it briefly, I think that would have been huge if I just found somebody that, could have mentored me. Um, I I still see myself as a baby chicken in the logistics world. I've only been in it for 7, 8 years. So but even if I was in it for 17, 18 years, I think just always finding a mentor and always finding somebody that could help kind of move you forward is super, super important. And then lastly is find where you fit in. I mean, if you're in a position or in a company that you just feel like this isn't the right fit, I promise you the right fit is out there. So don't feel bad about being a job hopper. Don't, always leave on good terms. It's never personal, but I think that there's always that right place and that right fit for you. So if you're feeling like that might not be the place, this might not be the company for me, don't don't be fearful of like stepping out of that and finding your spot, because your spot exists. I promise.
yes.
I found it. Yeah. And I'm on LinkedIn. I mean, Albana Tolaj. I'm currently with Cake Freight. I know you're super, into the brokerage, and I know you want to start up your own thing. And my director actually broke off and started his own, which is Cake Freight. I love the name. It's super, super adorable.
Yeah.
I'm with them right now. It's the same team I've been working with, since 2019. We just kind of got more onus, and we're really taking our ideas and driving it into cake. And we're 85%, women in the office, which is great. So I think naturally with that, we're a community and we're very nurturing. And, I think that really shows in our day to day. So if anyone wants to find me, even to talk, because I'm a talker and I feel like I've already lived 80 lives. So I'm like, people don't even need to reach me for like sales stuff. It's like, I love networking and connecting and just doing kind of what we did today. So it doesn't have to be anything official. If, someone's interested in a point that I made, it's like, let's speak on that. Or if somebody needs a mentor, I say that very lightly, I'm always here. If anybody is like thinking about getting into logistics, I just love networking and talking with everyone. So
Awesome. Well, yeah, we've had two conversations, and I
yeah.
can't say you are a great communicator. I've loved both of our conversations. They've been
Oh,
great.
I know. I love speaking with you. It's always so comfortable, and I really think you can relate a lot to it, and you open up very important conversations. So I appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you being a part of this, and this will probably be it'll be released in the next few weeks. I'll keep you updated, but yeah. So Albana, thank you very much for being a
Thank you.
guest on the Group Meets Grace podcast series, Empower Her. And yeah, we will talk to you soon.
Thank you. Keep in touch. Yeah.